I found a note tucked inside an old porcelain doll the summer I turned 9. The note had my name on it and a time to come upstairs. I never should have gone. I grew up in an old bungalow on the edge of town, the kind of house that creaks like it's still settling into the light. My mother, Grace, worked long shifts at the clinic, and my cousin Daniel slept on the sofa most nights, pretending not to hear the house. The attic was officially off limits and unofficially irresistible. That's where I found the doll. Her face was cracked, hair like straw, one glass eye clouded. She smelled like dust and lemon oil. She felt warm in my hands, like she had been waiting. The handwriting inside was my grandmother Eleanor's looping script, but Eleanor had died 2 years earlier. The note said, "Come up at midnight. Do not wake them." Maybe Daniel did it, I told myself. Maybe it was a prank. Children have a way of arguing with fear and calling it curiosity. Still, the clock kept ticking louder as midnight approached. At midnight, I climbed the attic ladder. Moonlight sliced across boxes and old quilts. In the center of the floor, there was a small circle of salt and a toy music box I had never seen. When I wound it, the song crawled out wrong, too slow, off key. The doll sat on top of the music box, eyes fixed on me, and the air tasted metallic. Something brushed my ankle, a cold wrist more than a hand. I froze. In the doorway stood Daniel, but not the Daniel I knew. His eyes were so dark they swallowed the moonlight, and his lips had a blue tint. Behind him, faces pressed to the attic boards like paper cutouts, small, pale faces that mouthed words I could not hear. The music box flipped open, and inside was a photograph of me sleeping, taken from a night I could not remember. A whisper hissed from beneath the boards, and my grandmother's voice. "You should not have come alone." The floorboards felt wrong under my feet, like a chest that tightened. The doll's single clouded, I seemed to blink. I dropped the music box, and it did not break. The attic filled with the soft sound of shoes shuffling, like a dozen little feet arranging themselves. I stumbled down the ladder, heart in my throat, slamming the attic hatch so hard the whole house answered. Daniel woke on the sofa the next morning with a fever and a blank I could not read. My mother said it was nothing more than a bad dream. I kept the doll for a few weeks, maybe because bravery feels like evidence. Then I burned it in the field behind our house. The ashes smelled like lemon and old paper. A month later, a neighbor found a small porcelain shard in her garden with my name scratched into the glaze. I never went back into that attic. At night, when the house shifts, I sometimes imagine the doll on the music box, waiting for the next person to wind it. I stayed late after lessons once, and something that wasn't the janitor locked the door behind me. I thought I was alone. I wasn't. School used to feel safe. That's how you lie to yourself about the place where you learn letters and fears. My name is Eve, and this was St. Mary's Secondary. Long corridor, peeling paint, chapel with broken stained glass. I was there for extra study. Mr. Reynolds, the janitor, was a quiet man who hummed hymns and smelled of tobacco. He left with his broom and the clack of keys. I buried my face in my book while the sun slipped away, thinking I had time. The footsteps started in the corridor, and they were wrong. They were too many, like a group, pacing the floor. They stopped outside my classroom door. I pressed my back to the wall and listened. The classroom windows were black, and the hallway light flickered. A voice said, "Eve?" And the sound was not Mr. Reynolds. When I cracked the door, I saw someone by the teacher's desk wearing the janitor's uniform. But the face was a copy, familiar and empty at once, like a picture that had been washed out. I tried to leave quietly, but the corridor stretched and the posters on the walls seemed to watch me move. The janitor stood by the gate now, but his shadow came from no streetlight I could see. When I tried to slip past him, his head turned slowly, and the small grin that spread across his face was too patient. His teeth were uneven and crowded like a row of gravestones. He smelled wrong, not of tobacco, but of something rotten masked with perfume. A chorus of soft voices rose from the lockers, names whispered like a list of forgotten roll calls. He said, "Come with me, Eve." We need someone to finish what we started." The door would not open. I pulled until my hands burned, feeling the hinge hold me back like a hand. The whispers grew louder, and one voice I thought I recognized said, "You were supposed to save us. You were supposed to be the one." The janitor reached for my sleeve. His fingers left a cold print like frost. I yanked free, shoved through the door, and ran into the empty street, books scattering like startled birds. My mother hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. The school said Mr. Reynolds had family problems and left the next week. They painted the halls and installed motion sensors. For a long time, I could not step into that corridor without my breath shortening. Sometimes when it rains, my phone shows a missed call from an unknown number, and the ringtone plays an old hymn we used to sing at assembly. I do not answer. I try to tell myself Mr. Reynolds was only a man with a strange illness. Maybe he was something else. Either way, I feel like a piece of me stayed behind in that hallway, pacing, waiting for the bell to ring again. You ever hear a voice under your bed that sounds exactly like your mother? I did. Only it knew things she could not possibly know. This was years after the attic and the school. I lived in a small flat with my little sister Lily and our Aunt Margaret. I had learned to sleep with the light on. One night Lily woke me whispering that someone was humming beneath her bed. We laughed at first. Kids invent monsters to feel brave. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and the humming kept going, like a radio tuned between stations. The voice called Lily by the pet name our mother used. We had lost our mother when I was very small. Hearing that name felt like pressing on a bruise. I knelt and peeked under the bed. At first there was only dust and a lost shoe. Then the voice said, "It's cold under here. Bring me the light." It sounded like our mother's cadence, but slowed and stitched wrong. I shone my torch, and the light landed on a photograph taped to the underside of the mattress. On the back my mother had written, "She remembers. Keep her quiet." I called Aunt Margaret. She crossed herself and told me to help move the mattress. When we lifted it, the floor was not plywood but a tight black cloth, stretched like skin. In the center lay a shallow hollow smelling of wet earth, which made no sense for a flat above a busy street. Inside the hollow were a pair of tiny shoes. Each shoe had a name stitched on it. Charlie, Thomas, Emily. Names of kids from the street who had vanished years ago, the ones whose absence people tried not to speak about. The bed began to tremble with a slow, patient shaking like someone settling their weight. The voice sang our mother's lullaby, and then between the lines it spoke other things, naming places where I had hidden a note, where I had buried a coin, the night Lily burned her favorite doll. It knew the stupid, private things you think are safe because they live inside you alone. The shoes jostled as if being tried on. Something cold brushed my ankle from below, like honey left in the dark. Aunt Margaret screamed, and a neighbor banged on the door. When the light flooded the room, the hollow was empty, the shoes gone, and the only scrap left was a tiny photograph folded into a square. The photograph was of me asleep. We moved that night. Aunt Margaret said we were carrying loose threads of memory that needed to be cut. We wrapped what we could in cloth and left the shoes behind. Lily asks sometimes if the voice will find us in the new flat. I tell her no and feel it might be true for an hour or so. At night, when pipes sing, I can still hear something like a lullaby threaded through the building. It hums my mother's tune and then adds a line I swear I have never learned. I keep checking under every bed I sleep near, just to be sure. Sometimes I find another small photograph or an old shoe, but never the same pair twice. I think the voice is a map, and every time it remembers a name it pins that name down like a needle. I worry about the day it pins mine.